That's right, folks. Another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. Today, we are going to break down the top 5 free agent moves that is going to impact fantasy football in 2023. One of the keys today you're going to realize right off the bat is some big trades happen. Darren Waller getting traded, some key releases like Zeke Elliott. But in the end, these are going to be big-time moves. They're going to shake up the fantasy landscape. And we got a special guest to jump on and talk about that top 5 before the show. Before we do, make sure you follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com. We have great content all off-season long for football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. So go jump over to Razzball.com and check out all the great content. But today's show is the top 5 free agent moves for fantasy football starting right now. All right, folks, we got a fresh face on today. It's Kyle Dozer. You can follow him at Kyle_football_network on Instagram. Kyle.
Yeah, he didn't say Twitter.
I didn't say Twitter. What's going on, man?
Oh, not a lot, dude. I'm excited. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, man. Honestly, today's show is going to be a good one. This is the juicy one. This is the one that when you saw that Adam Schefter or, one of the main guys tweet come out, they said, this guy landed on this team. You're like, oh, shit, here we go. That's the 5 we're going to be talking about today. And at number 5, you have a couple interesting ones here. So let's jump down to number 5. David Montgomery gets signed by the Detroit Lions. So why did David Montgomery make your top 5 on this list?
I think he could be more valuable there, splitting with Swift behind a better line on a better offense than he was in. And he doesn't have Justin Fields carrying the ball up 10 times a game.
Yeah.
I think he'll be more valuable there, and essentially the same role and probably split that he would have had with Herbert. But there's 95% chance that Swift gets hurt and he's a bell cow for at least part of the season.
Yep.
So I love this move for Montgomery. I love the move for the Lions. He's he has a better skill set than Jamal Williams had in that role because he can receive. He can be that total back if something does happen to Swift. But I do think it damages Swift's value dramatically.
The biggest thing here is as a DeAndre Swift truther heading into last season, it's just I actually thought Jamal Williams was coming back. So I was like, it didn't really change my mindset. But the problem is Montgomery, like you brought up, is a 3-down back. He's a legit 3-down back. And the other thing I thought was interesting, this is the crazy part. Last year, Williams, we all know about the 17 touchdowns, but he's vacating 33 carries inside the 5. He converted 14 of those for touchdowns. Over the last 2 seasons, David Montgomery has had 17 carries inside the 5. He converted 8 for touchdowns. So it's not like David Montgomery can't do that role, and I guarantee you he's going to get that. So that's going to lock him in to probably close. He's probably a good bet for double-digit touchdowns with all the continuity. Ben Johnson coming back, Jared Goff coming back. But speaking of Derek Carr, let's jump down to number 4. And number 4, Derek Carr. So Derek Carr, I'm not even worried about Derek Carr as an actual fantasy asset. And I do think that the Saints were a good landing spot for him with Pete Carmichael, the West Coast, his familiarity with Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen was the head coach that actually, was a part of the coaching staff and GM that brought him into the league in Oakland way back in the day. So I think there is some level of trust and continuity there for him. But the other thing is more about the impact it's going to have on a very, very talented offense. So Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, those kind of players, if Alvin Kamara, of course, doesn't get suspended, which he probably will, which is fine because you have Jamal Williams back there. But it gives me more confidence. You also have Rashid Shaheed, I think his name is.
Shaheed. Shaheed.
Yeah, Rashid Shaheed. Yeah, thank you. He showed some flashes last year with nice vertical threat. But Derek Carr has proven, just last season, we saw him lead an offense at the RB3, the wide receiver 6, and the tight end 7 in PPR points per game. So it's not that he cannot support multiple pass catchers or multiple fantasy assets. And I think last year, dealing with the Andy Dalton experiment, we saw Chris Olave flourish, but now you infuse Michael Thomas back in. It gives me more confidence that he could support Thomas and Olave. Any quick thoughts about Derek Carr and his impact on the Saints?
Oh, yeah, I totally love the move. I agree with everything you just said. I'm a big fan of Chris Olave. And as good as he was with the quarterback formerly known, or I guess I should say the Andy Dalton, formerly known as quarterback. You know, he had a pretty good year, and I think he'll do even better now. And like speaking of Jamal Williams, right? We were just talking about him on the Lions. Now he's down there. Kamara gets suspended, whatever. Adding Carr down there, I think, will make them respect that passing game more and open up a whole lot more running lanes, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and speaking of running lanes, let's jump down to number 3. It's Miles Sanders joining the Carolina Panthers. Give us your thoughts about what you think his fit will be in Carolina and why you think it's in the top 5 moves this offseason.
I think his value, as good as he was with Philly this year, I think his value increases going to Carolina. They're fixing to have a young quarterback. They're trying to make some moves at receiver. Not super excited about those, but I think they're going to lean on him in that run game because of a rookie QB, which they just traded for, which y'all have already talked about. And also, he doesn't have a Jalen Hurts siphoning carries and touchdowns, goal line carries, and all of that away from him. I think his value actually improves going to Carolina. I like the move for him a lot.
So my only thought process here is, so Frank Wright, by the way, his old head coach, Nick Sirianni, was the OC under Frank Wright, and now Frank Wright gets the job in Carolina. It gives me hope that at least Sanders will know kind of the scheme, the offense, because there's going to be continuity there for him. The other thing about this, too, though, is that his old running back coach is now the running back coach in Carolina as well. And so, like, those kind of things say something to me. Like, those coaches were there already, and they said, let's go get Miles Sanders. And I feel like that gives me a little confidence that they will trust him a little more than maybe that Nick Sirianni coaching staff, because it always felt like, even in the playoffs, you saw it. Like, Kenneth Gainwell in the Super Bowl was getting more looks than Miles Sanders. It was like, okay, and it just always felt like Sanders was never fully trusted, and maybe this is kind of that perfect fresh start for him.
Yeah.
The other aspect, though, is like, besides Miles Sanders right now, we'll see what the rookie brings in. Aforementioned Andy Dalton, by the way, is there in Carolina. But we'll see what happens. But there isn't like a lot of talent around him, so maybe his scoring opportunities come down. But overall, you got to like his job security because there isn't that many other players. Any final thoughts about Sanders before we move on?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to lose a whole lot of touches to Chuba Hubbard. So he's I do love that job security for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's jump down to number 2. It's Tony Pollard, and this is not just Tony Pollard. It is the release of Zeke and Tony Pollard getting the franchise tag. Now, there is very few moments like during the offseason. I'm always thinking to myself, no. Zeke will re-sign or he'll get restructured, and it's going to be fine. All of a sudden, now you're hearing all these reports. Zeke's going to sign with Philly. Zeke's going to sign with this team. He ain't coming back to the Cowboys. And I'm just like, are we really going to get like bell cow Tony Pollard? Like, what does that mean? I'm like thinking to myself, like, so I just wanted to take a look. And when I was looking at Tony Pollard's career and when he started seeing featured touches, so I used 15 or more touches in a game for this stat. So in 14 career games where he saw 15 or more touches, he averaged 19 PPR points per game. That would have been tied with Derrick Henry as the RB4 last year. I'm going to take a pen out and just sign me up for some Tony Pollard. I don't know how high he's going to go. Now, he is coming off the major injury. He did break his leg. Now, those are things that are probably a little bit easier to come back from than a ACL or Achilles tear. So there is something there. There's also some rumors that the Cowboys might draft a running back early. Don't know if that's true. They also signed Ronald Jones as well, which I'm not too worried about. But I just love the impact because when you have an explosive player who's earned more touches and then the team that later in that offseason paves the way for him, you got to love it for fantasy football. So what's your thoughts about Tony Pollard? Anything else before we move to 1?
Well, as a Cowboys fan, I can tell you I absolutely loved this move to get rid of Zeke. I was ready to get rid of Zeke and go with Pollard before we gave Zeke that ridiculous contract a few years ago. I was like, leave him in Cabo where he's having his practices. Let's just go with Pollard. You're right. I've heard the same rumors about maybe drafting one. I think he'll be a day 3 guy if we do.
Okay.
I could see maybe, a smattering of carries going to maybe that guy or Ronald Jones or whatever. But I think you're still going to see probably 70-75% of the workload going to Tony Pollard regardless. So, yeah, I think we get to see workhorse Tony Pollard this year, and I'm here for it.
Oh, man, sign me. I'm excited. Well, as a Cowboys fan, we're going to transition to a Giants fan, as you can see from behind me. And our number one, Darren Waller, gets traded to the New York Giants. All smiles on my end. And this has come from a guy who the last time they made a big splash is Kenny Golladay. It didn't work out so well. But yes, tell me about why Darren Waller tops our list and what's the biggest impact for him for fantasy football in 2023.
Well, again, as a Cowboys fan, I hated this move. But as a fantasy football player, I think it's fantastic for Waller's value. I think it helps Daniel Jones' fantasy value. He was already kind of ascending this last year as we saw him improving under Brian Dabble a little bit. And but Waller comes in and he's instantly the best receiving option on that team. He gives Daniel Jones a great target to throw to. He'd probably be a touchdown machine, whatever Barkley's not running in. And I absolutely love it. I hated it for the Raiders. I hated that trade for the Raiders. I mean, they end up now with O.J. Howard and Austin Hooper. They don't have tight end to speak of, but
it just seems like Josh McDaniels wanted his guys. It's like he did not want to give John Gruden or the previous coaching staff any credit for his success. Right. So it's like when he came in, it's immediately got rid of Waller, got rid of Derek Carr. They brought in Devontae Adams. They're reshaping this entire offense. They bring in Jacoby Myers. They bring in Jimmy Garoppolo. They want to bring in the guys that so he could say when they have success that these are my guys, my coaching, my team. So that's how the mindset took in. And like even with Waller, when I looked at the contract, I actually said this earlier in the offseason. I said, wow, if you got this contract extension, but in reality, the contract has like an out after next year and they could basically pay him no money. So I was like, oh, wow, that makes me feel like there's more to this than there was. And then bam, literally a few months later, he gets traded to the Giants. Now, Waller has proven in the past that he could be the number one option on an offense. So he had just 2020, he had 145 targets and turned that into 1,100 yards, nearly 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns. Now, no one looked at the Raiders offense at that time and said, man, they're like that passing attack is just amazing. It was a good passing attack. And I would hope that the Giants would invest a little bit more at the receiver position, but you look at the guys they've brought in. They brought in Jamison Crowder. They brought back Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton. They got Wan'Dale Robinson and Paris Campbell. Like a lot of those guys are slot receivers, interior receivers. Like where's that boundary guy that's going to go? Isaiah Hodgins, I love him. Great player. But I don't want him as my number one option on the outside with Darius Slayton. So you got to hope the Giants can bring in another player to kind of take some attention off Waller. Plus, he had some injuries over the last few years, too, which is a little worrisome. But before we close the show, Kyle, any final thoughts about our top 5? Was there any honorable mention that isn't here? That you're number 4 or 5, you're like, I wanted to put them in. Anybody want to throw out there before we close the show?
No, I think this pretty well covers my top transactions. There was a bunch of stuff that was just kind of like, ho-hum. But like, Singletary to the Texans and Harris to the Bills, and like there's just some that's just kind of like, Yeah. No, that's true. The only one I thought about adding in here was Leonard Fournette being released because I could get that Rashad White. It's like the Tony Pollard feel a little bit, like that Rashad. Just free the beast, give the young kid the rock. But that offensive line is just going to be awful. And that whole Baker Mayfield experiment should be fun to watch at least. But man, oh man, Kyle Trask, good luck. Hope you can beat him out. But anyway, that's all we got for today. This is our top 5 free agent moves for fantasy football so far in 2023. Kyle, before we close out the show, tell the people where they can find your content, where they can find your podcast, all that information. Well, you can find us on Instagram, as Bobby said, fantasy_football_network. Twitter, I'll give you the Twitter. _FF_network. We got a lot of underscores in our stuff. Fantasyfootball.network website. We're building a new website and building out a new app this off season, which will be available by the time the season kicks off. Should be available well before that. But check us out, man. Thanks again for the invite.
Oh, well, we're going to see a lot more of each other. That's my New Year's resolution 3 months after the fact. We'll make sure to get you on again. We got plenty more content all off season long. Make sure you follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com, folks. We're doing great things we basically do every sport now. We do bocce ball. We do badminton probably. I don't even know at this point. We have every sport you need to cover
football. I got to check out these bocce ball streams.
It's going to be lit, folks. I'm so excited. Well, I thank my guest again, Kyle Dozer. You can follow him at fantasy_football_network. And go make sure you follow me, Bobby LaMarco, at Bobby LaMarco on Twitter. We are out of here, folks.